In the process, I brought up the subject of the reptile aliens and my belief about the reptile aliens and what the ancient peoples of the ancient world, the Babylonians, the Sumerians, the Phoenician Canaanites, the Egyptians, especially the Sumerians, all the ancient peoples of the world talked about the reptile aliens. And so I just brought that up in passing, that I think that there are reptile aliens here. I've heard too many stories, and then I told some of the stories that I had heard. Well, after the program, I got a phone call from a guy who later on I found out is an extremely wealthy businessman in Las Vegas. He buys and sells hotels and commercial properties in Vegas, and he was the biggest there. And he said to me, he said, Jordan, we listen to Lew Epton. We love Lew Epton. So in the office in the mornings, we listen to Lew Epton on the show. And he says, but this morning when you came on, we got so interested in listening to you that everybody just kind of quit work for a little bit and was listening to you. And he says, and when you mentioned the reptile aliens, it shocked us. And he said, I'm a Christian, and I have 5 men who work for me in my office, and they're Christians, and they all belong to the same church. We all go to the same church, and all 6 of us are in the office, and we were hearing you today. And he said, when you mentioned reptile aliens, I had to call you and tell you. We're Christians, but every year we go somewhere in the world on vacation, and my company pays for everything. And he says, so I take, and all 6 families go together on a vacation somewhere. And he says, and last year, now this was like in '88, so he's talking about '87. And he said, last year we decided to go camping for a couple of weeks in Colorado. And he says, we were up in the mountains and we broke camp one morning, and we walked up to the top of this mountain. We were almost there anyway at camp, and then the next morning when we broke camp, we walked up to the top of the mountain to look over the lay of the land. And he says that out in the valley, we could see that there had been an area that had been cleared away. It was like a round area that had been cleared away. And there was a circle of people out there, and they were all wearing robes, and they were all holding hands and swaying back and forth, singing or chanting. You could barely hear them. But he said, but it was very quiet where we were. We could see that there was some kind of a ritual dancing or swaying back and forth in a circle. They were all holding hands. And there was obviously somebody in the middle, like a priest or something in the middle. And he said, this is out in the middle of nowhere, that these people are here with this thing that they're doing. And he said, we're up here in the mountains looking down on them. And he said, while we were standing there looking at them, all of a sudden, a second figure popped up out of nowhere. But it was bigger than the man that was in the middle. It's in the middle too, but it's much bigger. And it pointed up at us. And he said, and all the singing stopped, everybody stopped and pointed. And he said, we knew we'd been had. And he says, we didn't know what was going on, but whatever it was, it just popped in out of nowhere, pointed up at us, and everybody is now pointing at us. And he said, so we figured we better just get out of here. And he said, when we turned around, it was standing behind us. That thing which was down there was already behind us. That's how quick it moved. He said, when we turned around to run, there was a reptile alien standing behind us. He said this thing was at least 7 to 7.5 foot, maybe 8 foot tall, had a reptile man's head, but it was a reptile head. It was very muscular, looked like a human body on the ordinary of a human body, but a reptile body, extremely muscular. And he said, and it was looking at us, and he said, it cast some kind of a spell on us so that the children and the women, no one could move. we were like frozen. And he said, and even nobody could say anything, nobody could cry, nobody could run, nobody could do anything. And he said we were staring at it, and it was looking at us, but it had control over us. It had locked us so that we couldn't move, we couldn't scream, we couldn't do anything. And he said, and this thing was gazing at all of us, looking at the children, looking at the women. He said, this reptile alien, and he says, we're just Christians in a church, but we saw a reptile alien. This thing was not of this world. And he said, this thing was looking at all of us. And then he said, it looked at the men, and the look he gave us, we understood. He didn't say anything, but we knew. He was saying, I'm going to leave you alone. But when I leave here, you better get out of here. And he said, the alien walked over like he was leaving, is gone. Just like they was gone. And he said, when he was gone, the moment he was gone, everyone came back to life. And the babies were screaming, the women were yelling, screaming. Everybody came back to life instantly. And he says, we ran like we were totally out of our minds, running back to the cars. We ran down the hill, got in the cars, and the women were screaming, the children were yelling, and he says that we drove back, and he said it was the most incredible, horrible experience. And he says, all the guys in my office will tell you, we saw a reptile alien in Colorado. So when you're talking about, he says, so when you're talking about reptile aliens in the ancient world, I got news for you. There's one we know for sure in Colorado. We saw him. And he said, this thing ran back, and it went so fast, it was just, it's gone. But that's how fast it came up behind us. We knew that we'd been spotted, we turned around, and it was too late. It's already standing here. And he said, so when I hear tales now about people who have seen reptile aliens, I got to tell you, there's 6 families here. We all belong to the same church, and I will guarantee you, we saw one. You can bet on it. So, and I found out because I started asking questions when I was in Vegas about this man and his company. And yes, he's a very wealthy man and a very, very big company, well known in Las Vegas for buying and selling the hotels and big properties. And he said, yeah, I'm just telling you what happened to us.
And my suspicion, which may well be yours as well.
Say it again.
My suspicion, and it may well be yours as well, is that for every person who comes forward and reports a story, there are 100 others who don't.
Oh, I'm probably right. You're probably right.
Maybe 1,000 others who don't, because who's going to come forward publicly and say a story like that? Not many.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons, of course, why I want to encourage you to, why I have been supporting you in coming forward to tell the stories, not only to support David Icke, but it's to support other people to have had these experiences, because I suspect that they are fairly widespread and nobody wants to talk about it.
Well, you're right.
That's my guess.
Did you ever talk to Dr. Roger Lear about his case up in Bakersfield?
I don't believe so. I know Roger Lear,
yeah,
and he's a very good man. I don't think I know about the Bakersfield incident. Tell me about it.
Well, I'm just trying to remember the story basically. If he were here, he would give you the real dope on it. But I'm just remembering the basic story is that there was a guy up in Bakersfield who is a fire investigator. He's a fireman investigator for the fire department. And he has been having reptile aliens coming into his bedroom. Him and his wife have had reptile aliens, he says, were coming into his bedroom. They didn't harm him, but he said, he was telling Dr. Lear, because he called Roger Lear, because Roger is noted for his work with aliens and implants. And so Roger went up to see him, and this guy's with the fire department as an investigator, arson investigator for the fire department. And he said that the guy was saying that At night, him and his wife were in bed, and the wall facing them became like water. It looked like water. And reptile aliens walked through. And when they came through, then the wall came back up to a wall again. And he said that they stood there looking at him and walking around the room. And he said, we were so frightened out of our wits. We're just watching these reptile aliens walking around in the bedroom. And he said, then we feel this strange feeling again, and the wall becomes like a water. And I think it's interesting that that's the way, you know, what is it, Star Trek or whatever it is, the wall looks like water. Well, this is a long time ago. This guy was talking. This is a long time ago. And and he said the aliens will walk back through again. So he said, so what they decided to do was they got a towel, large, big towels, which were the same color as the carpet. And I'm just trying to remember all of this from the experience, but they glued on the back or taped on the back aluminum foil, about 6 or 8 sheets of aluminum foil over and over on top of each other, and taped them on the towel and then laid it back over. So the idea was that anything coming through that wall will not see the towel because it's the same color as the floor, and will walk, and the impression will be on the aluminum foil to prove that there was something in that room. And he said, and sure enough, these things come back. On a few days later, they came back and walked through and walked around, and then looked at him and her in the bed, and then walked back over and walked back through the wall again. And he said, I've got him. They stepped on the carpet, on the towel. And he said, yeah, and they pick it up, and you could see the imprint of the foot, the 3, I think he said there was like 3 fingers on the foot. And yet there was a piece of the nail was caught in the carpet. And they took that piece of nail and they called Dr. Lear and showed it to him. And they've had that little piece of a nail sent to, I don't know, Los Alamos or one of those big research laboratories, government research labs. And they said that this was, it was still alive. It was still living. It was a living tissue, and it was still alive. And that it was seemed to be growing. When they got it, as opposed to where it was now, it's grown in length, so it seems to be growing, even though it's not connected to the body. It's still growing. And so that's just one more story about a reptile aliens.
Did they get any analysis of what this... was this in the days of DNA tests when they could...
Well, yeah, you know what? He was just telling me this off the cuff, you know, and he didn't go into much, because I guess we were talking about reptile aliens. He said, well, you know, I'm just having some investigation of something's going on right now up in Bakersfield. But they did get a footprint on the aluminum foil to show that there was something came through the wall, whatever it was. So these are, you're just confirming that these aren't apparitions. Physical. These apparitions actually have weight.
They have weight. Yeah, they have weight
because they came through the wall, and their imprint is on the aluminum foil.
Yeah, and they have some kind of interdimensional capability.
Exactly, they have interdimensional capabilities that come through and walk back into.
If you enjoyed this, make sure to watch the next video on AwakenZone. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell, but you won't want to miss what's coming next.